Terumah, Sheni. The Parsha talks about the various parts of the Mishkan, how the Mishkan was built, and how the various Kalim in the Mishkan were built. At the end of Rishon, the Torah talks about the Aron, the famous ark. The Aron was made of wood that was covered by gold on the inside and outside. It had a specific form. It held the luchos, it held the shivrei luchos, and eventually it held the Sefer Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. The Aron was a miraculous item in the Mishkan. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the nisim that happened. And in Sheni, the pasuk talks about the kruvim, the cherubs that were on top of the Aron. The Aron, by the pasuk says by the ark, "B'tabas ha'aron yiyu habadim lo yasuru mimenu." All of the main kalim in the Mishkan had rings on the side of them and poles that went through the rings. And those poles were used when the Mishkan was transported from place to place, and they were carried on the shoulders of the various Leviim, whoever had to carry that particular keli. So the Aron as well had rings on the side, and it had poles that stuck through the rings, and those poles were used to carry the Aron from place to place. One thing, however, was very unique about the Aron. Those poles never were removed. When it came to the other kelim, like the Mizbeach, the poles were removable. They came out, and they weren't in the Mizbeach when the Mizbeach was in use. The Aron, however, the poles always remained there. And the Gemara tells us that, in fact, the Aron, which was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies, the poles actually stuck out into the Kodesh, so that when the pareichas, the curtain that separated the Kodesh from the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the poles actually pushed out and stuck through. They didn't go through, but they stuck out and pushed out the pareichas, so you could actually see the poles from the Kodesh. The issue of these poles are very, very important, because the Gemara tells us that there was one of the miracles that happened with the Aron, was that it looked like the Leviim were carrying the Aron, but in fact they weren't carrying the Aron. The Gemara tells us the Aron was noisei as noisov. In fact, the Aron carried the people that were carrying it. What is the significance of this nace? There is no nace that's there for no reason. What is the significance of a nace that the Aron was noisei as noisov, that it carried the people that carried it? The Chasam Sofer says that he learned from his Rebbe, he had a famous Rebbe, Rav Nosson Adler, that what does it mean that the Aron is noisei as noisov? The Aron represents Torah. It represents the Lomdei Torah. It represents those people who spend their time learning Torah. The Badim, the poles, that represents the Tomchei Torah, the people that support the Torah. And they hold the Torah up. Those are the people who give money for yeshivas. Those are the people who support kolelim. Those are the people that help their rabbonim and support their batei midrashim, etc., etc. But it looks like that the supporters are holding up the Torah. It looks like the supporters are holding up the Koilin Galite. It looks like the supporters are holding up the Rabbonim. But in fact, says Rav Nosson Adler, it's just the other way around. The nace of the Aron is that the Aron holds up the people that support it. And the Torah and the Lomdei Torah, the people who study Torah, in fact, they are holding up the people who are donating. And that it should be looked at as a schus, that it's a good thing to have the ability, the right to be a giver. I once heard from Matisyahu Solomon that he spoke about the Avinu Malkeinus that we say on Yom Noraim, and we say it on a Tainus. And there's one Avinu Malkeinu that we say, Avinu Malkeinu kasveinu b'sefer zechuyos. Write us in the book of Zechusim. And the question is, what do you mean, write us in the book of Zechusim? Either we did the Zechusim and then we'll get written, or we didn't do the Zechusim and we won't get written. Why we have to ask Hashem to write us? It depends on what we did or didn't do. And the Mashgiach explained that that's not what we're davening for. When we say Kasveinu b'sefer zechuyos, we're saying, write me in the book of Zechusim for next year. Give me opportunities to do Zechusim next year. The ones that we did, either they're in or they're out. Either we did them or we didn't. But Hashem should put us in a position that people should come and ask us for nedavos. They should ask us to support the Torah. They should ask us to support yeshivas. And this is what will enable us to be carried, so that the Torah can carry us instead of we carry the Torah.